I'd like to thank the National Science Foundation Office of Polar Programs for their financial support to ARCUS and the seminar series. Next up, I'm going to introduce our speakers. Michael Koskey is an associate professor with the Center for Cross-Cultural Studies, which offers an MA and a PhD in Indigenous Studies. While serving in the Marine Corps, he received a BS in anthropology and a BA in political science from the University of Central Florida, and afterward received an MS in anthropology from Purdue University and a PhD in anthropology from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Mike's research focuses on cross-cultural relations, cooperative research, oral history, traditional knowledge, ethnohistory, cultural change, political economy, decolonization, Indigenous food sovereignty and security, resource use and allocation, and Indigenous cosmology, mythology. Mike has done field work with Indigenous communities throughout Alaska, in Central and Eastern Siberia, and in Central America. Next up, Yoko Kugo is an assistant professor for the Center for the Cross-Cultural Studies Indigenous Studies program at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. She is from Tokyo, Japan, and has been living in Alaska for about 18 years. Yoko is interested in the community-based participatory research approach to gain local perspectives of lifeways by participating in daily activities, observing various events, sharing findings with local knowledge holders and elders for the communities to use the finding for future education. Some of her projects include Iliamna Lake, Navar Park, place names studies, and the study of changes in underground food storage and food lifeways in Arctic and subarctic communities. Her research interests include oral history, Indigenous traditional local knowledge, community-based participatory research, geography, food lifeways, and Alaska history. And she will go over the proper way to say Iliamna Lake in her presentation. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Mike and Yoko, and thank you for joining us. And we'll let Mike take over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janet, and thank you to everyone who's here in the audience. I really appreciate it. I see a lot of familiar names from the past and the present, and I really appreciate that as well. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about our project that is an NSF-funded project. We're currently in the third year of a three-year project with a proposal for extension. And I'll start sharing the screen right now. Let's make sure that it works. Okay, there. Everybody sees it okay, I assume? We did test
yes.
it. Okay. I also want to say thanks for the facilitators at ARCUS, both Stacy and Janet, for inviting us and offering us this time to present our work in these communities. Likewise, I'm also fighting COVID right now, so sometimes I might be interrupted by a cough or sneeze, and I apologize for that. So what we're going to do today is not only talk about the project itself, but how we conduct the project, what we've learned in that process, and then, of course, our partnerships and next steps. Because this project couldn't be done without partnerships with communities, most especially, and as well as other research organizations and other researchers. I also wanted to do a quick land acknowledgement because in our department, we teach our students that this is important to recognize. And so I acknowledge that we live and work as guests on the ancestral lands of the Ch'eno Kutana here in Fairbanks, Alaska. So just wanted to recognize that. So I think originally Yoko and I had decided to do a brief introduction here on the first screen, but because we've been already fully introduced, I think we'll just go ahead and move on. And but we are both faculty with the Center for Cross-Cultural Studies, Indigenous Studies programs. Okay, this is a slide that basically just shows where our project takes place. Of course, Yoko and I, as well as our fellow social science researchers, Teresa John, who is a retired professor from our program, as well as Kazuki Saito and Go Iwahana, have been working on the Alaska side here. Kazuyuki and Go have also been working in Japan and when circumstances allow in Siberia. And so we've got 4 partnering communities here in Alaska. That's Anaktuvik Pass, Point Hope, Savunga, and Gamble. And we have to, of course, acknowledge how important it is that these communities have agreed to work with us over these years. And this means certainly more years than the project because of making contact and discussing the project before it ever began. So our 2 primary funders are listed below here, National Science Foundation, Office of Polar Programs, and we very much appreciate their generous support, as well as the Research Institute for Humanity and Nature. And that's located in Kyoto, Japan. Okay, just kind of an overview of an outline. For the most part, the slides will provide additional information to what I'll be presenting and what Yoko will be presenting, but essentially the project seeks to understand how local communities adapt to changing climate and socioeconomic globalization through the use of local indigenous knowledge traditions. And here we focus on the role of underground meat caches and local food life history. And this concept will be discussed by Yoko here in just a few moments. So you can see then, as far as the presentation goes, we're going to look at both the project itself and our activities in the project, but also importantly, how this project has worked with communities, in communities, with the communities as partners to the degree that they wish to partner in the research itself. And so it is very much community-based and community-focused. So what is food life history? I'll turn that over then to Yoko. Thanks, Yoko.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Janet and Stacy again for inviting us today. So now I jump into the definition of what is a food life history. Our project team defines the food life history as a cycle of harvesting, fishing, hunting, and plant gathering, processing and preserving these food, and their transportation, distribution, and consumption. This experimental holistic concept seeks to evaluate humanity, food resources such as animals and plants, and the natural environment in relation to local and global factors. This image on this slide, distribution of whale meat during the Kagurak Whale Festival in Point Hope or Tekigak, exemplifies the local practice. On day 3 of Kagurak Whale Festival, the women's side, wedding captain's wife and their crew, they cook their traditional food in their tent, while men eat and tell stories in their men's side. During the event, young children watch how their parents cook and distribute all the food. They often help the women, the mom, auntie, grandma, they help them distributing food to the men's side or the going to the women's camp, women's tent. Also, they listen to their elder stories while eating and sitting with them. So the food life history includes those local practices and their relationships between humans and often non-humans, and in this case, most are the whale animals, also the landscape and sea ice. The next slide, please. Thank you, Mike. So we developed 3 aspects of food life history. The first aspect focuses on plants and animals. Both wild and domesticated are food resources for human beings, but have their own individual life histories. Like animals, whale, they have their own life histories. The second aspect of food life history explores human food life, including food traditions and their history. This aspect emphasizes the life history and activities of human beings, such as the socio-cultural effects of spiritual ties between specific food resources and human groups, and group identity represented by food, in addition to food safety and distribution food traditions. For instance, these half-dry salmon strips. I know that there are many Alaska Native peoples, they prepare the dry fish or the half-dry fish across Alaska. There are, I think, by family, could be by region, could be by community, they have their own way of splitting fish because of the weather conditions and landscape. They have certain time to dry fish, the strips on the rock, and then they go bring them to the smokehouses. And those are all locally practiced. The third aspect of food life history emphasizes a theoretical shift toward a postmodern paradigm of scholarship and thought. This includes dichotomies between academic knowledge based on Western framework of thought that I think many of us, we have gained through the academia, and indigenous knowledge that we need to learn from local peoples. Also between state and the people, and or nature and culture. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Yoko. And this leads us into then this question of food sovereignty. Clearly, by what Yoko has explained, we intend and recognize that we are the learners. We learn from the communities and the knowledge experts in the community. And by doing so, we're able to help to align our research interest with the community interests. And this is done, of course, through not only taking multiple perspectives on the topics of research, but also even sometimes shifting the research to some degree to be more relevant to the community. Because if it's relevant to the community, we're going to have better support from the community. And one of the issues that often comes up, especially these days, is this notion of food sovereignty. Let me make sure that everybody recognizes that the difference between food sovereignty and food security are really the same, are not the same, sorry. So people are food secure when they have access, physical and economic access to food resources that meet their dietary needs as well as their preferences. But food sovereignty is a condition in which people are in control of the processes that lead to food sovereignty. And this means, of course, having a degree of both economic sovereignty primarily and then political sovereignty secondarily to be able to achieve that. And so I'm not going to, of course, read these definitions here, but this gives you kind of an idea of some of the pillars or some of the principles behind food sovereignty, which seeks to recognize and to promote individual communities' capacity to provide not only the food that they need, but the culturally appropriate food that they need. And so you can see then by the values listed here on the left, particularly protect local food systems, local access and decision making, working with nature and support ecosystems are all central to the capacity for communities to achieve and maintain food sovereignty. And so our project then, in fact, let me go to the next slide here. Our project tries to link these concerns of food sovereignty with food life history by using food life history as a really almost a method which is of course theoretically informed to better understand how local communities are adapting to place through their food traditions in spite of socioeconomic globalization and of course climate change as well. And so what we do is try to focus on communities' needs around their food security and food sovereignty interests, and how these can be enhanced and carried forward under conditions of food traditions. In other words, understanding food life history and how those traditions can be used to adapt to the changing conditions. And we've come to find that this is very interesting to local communities in terms of helping to revitalize certain traditions that maybe aren't practiced so much or that are in jeopardy of being potentially set aside. It gives, in a way, a new impetus for these practices to be continued. So we also are connecting our work to food sovereignty assessments. And so what is a food sovereignty assessment? This is basically an asset assessment of sorts in the community, where we try to understand what the trajectory of food changes and food tradition changes are as a result of globalization and climate change. And we're not, of course, the only ones to be doing this in research or in administration. And I've placed some information on this slide here to kind of show how this is something that is happening not only in these coastal communities that we're focusing on in this presentation, but also throughout Alaska and in the interior here as well. And so it's important to recognize that food security requires food sovereignty requires self-determination at the local level. And so we seek to promote that capacity for self-determination as a part of our research. Let's see. Sorry, let me move forward here on my notes a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to move to here is a little bit of a discussion of the co-production of knowledge and how to do this as a genuine partnership. And of course, I think one of the things that we have to remember is that in any kind of partnership, it has to be a two-way discussion, a two-way dialogue. And this means then that we base our work in communities, and we encourage community participation in all aspects of our work. But of course, we don't oblige it. And what that means is that different communities participate in different ways, providing local, traditional, and indigenous knowledge as they see fit, as we address the research questions of both the project and the interest of the community. And of course, community interests tend to be more oriented towards community development issues. And almost always it's possible to align the research with those local initiatives. It's important that collaborative research is recognizing the value of local knowledge, and local knowledge, of course, being any knowledge about place, whereas traditional knowledge is that knowledge passed across generations, and indigenous knowledge being traditional knowledge that derives from indigenous people. This is knowledge that we recognize as researchers as very ancient and very deep and very complex, and is, generally speaking, not formally defined in practice. And so it's important as researchers that we, as cross-cultural researchers, that we learn and understand this knowledge within its own cultural and worldview contexts. And so let me move on to the next slide here. And so we do this through local engagement, and Yoko will talk a little bit more about this. But you can see, I think, one of the most important aspects of this process is this first bullet point here. This begins with an honest introspection of who we are and where we are in our lives, and what the effects of our conditions and our past is on the research process, and how we will reconcile that as we work through our data and we work with the community. And so we proposed the project to the community prior to the project beginning, to assess interests in the community, and to also get an idea of what communities would like to pull out of this. And of course, we made alterations in each of the communities within our project itself to address those particular local needs. So with that, I will pass it on to Yoko.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, as Mike explained, this is our research modules, the framework. This diagram demonstrates interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary fieldwork framework. While natural scientist focuses on getting the physical data collection and analysis, social scientists, including Mike and I, we have conducted ethnographic fieldwork, such as participant observations, conducting interviews, and visiting locals. And we always also have the analyzed data using grounded theory. That's now we are in a stage from last 3 years of interviews, and we are planning to work with a local assistant for the coding clarifications for the upcoming meeting in the communities. As Michael mentioned that before, when we work within the communities, we make sure that we contact the community entities, village council, cities, and oftentimes we contact the schools, how we can engage with the local students and how we can partner with them, the whole communities, and the research to be relevant to local residents or local needs. And I was previously a postdoc for this project, and I have been a main community outreach for this project for the last 3 years. And as you see, in the middle is a community meeting, outreach, building rapport network. This is a core for this project, community engagement. Next slide, please. And so this is a little bit more detail of a community outreach. When we coordinate to travel to the community, I always call the community offices, mostly the tribal offices, and schedule a visit with the tribal leaders or administrators. Even though we plan to go to that certain time, we might have to reschedule our meeting or field trips right before we depart, or sometimes when we arrive there, we have to just stop there because there are some local activities. And one time we have experience was the local elders passed away the day before we arrived to one of the community. We just stopped there when we came back. Or because during the COVID outbreak, we always have to call them until we go to the community probably a couple of days before. And then the day before, they call me that, no, we can't go outside, I can't go. So that we need to be, as a researchers, we need to be very flexible and acknowledge the time and the partnership. When we go to the community, we always organize an annual meeting in the communities. We found that each community is unique in like time preference and snack preference. And as you see on the right side, welcome community of hello to community of Sabunga. They firstly they like Subway sandwiches, and some other communities they like different food or snack preference, and they're always the community told us that it's always good to bring the food to the communities, and we get to. I think because we talk about the food, when we are talking, eating, we get to share more. And I think the last 3 years, the partner communities engagement has been growing. For the first year, we had about 5, 6 participants. Second year, a little bit more. And the third year, I think one of the community, we had about 20 participants came and share their interest to the community, to the meeting. Yes, and next slide, please. So the principle of community-based engagement is to establish trust with the partner community. Engaging with the community research participants, such as knowledge holders and elders, helps researchers to gain insider perspectives and enhance the community's well-being by encouraging the study community to identify and pursue their own goals for the project. Through this engagement, the goals of the community and the goals of the academic researcher are brought into alignment through the effort of the research project itself. Working in partnership with Alaska Native communities, researchers have recognized the importance of local knowledge and the voices that need to be taken into consideration along scientific data. And this picture on the right side, it's an Akturbuk path. The community asked us to engage with a local student. So the last June, this year, last June, past June, we had a workshop with the students. We created a model of ice setter that we learned from Akturbuk elders. In their cellar, they used to have like round shape, a round dome kind in the bottom, and they had each shelf for each family, and the students are learning by doing, and we were able to donate this model to the Nunamiot school after we finished the activities. And they were hoping to continue the students are learning from local elders. And this became a part of this project. Scientists traditionally have not used oral history data, like the elder stories, because it lacks systematic written record. However, many projects in Alaska and elsewhere, including our project, show that knowledge holders' memory is derived from people witnessing the details of a historical event, their everyday activities, and their first-hand experiences from generation to generation regarding to changes in landscape, weather, and economy that is crucial for research. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I think I have one more slide,
Hi.
right? Yeah, so go to the next. Yes, thank you. So Alaska Native peoples have relied on harvesting local, seasonally available salmon, freshwater seal, birds, land, and marine mammals. Traditions of harvesting, preparation, and distribution of local food strengthen people's cultural identity, physically and spiritually, because of their ancestors and the family have practiced these lifeways to live successfully with the land, water, air, and their inhabitants, with planning and actions being taken in consideration of future generations. These skills are local, traditional, cultural knowledge that is passed down generations, and these serve as a symbol of community and ethnic identity. These pictures again demonstrate Tikigak way of food distribution during Kagurak. And this is the one that from the women's side, while men's tent, this is still the Kagurak day 3 food distributions. While women that side, they were cooking, cutting whale meat, intestine, hearts, or the beluga tails. When they were busy working, they always put the Ziploc bag on the side so that when the other wedding captain's wives, crew, when they were distributing meat, they put the food in there as a show of respect and sharing. And I thought I have not seen this type of food gathering or sharing other communities. And I think every community is unique locally. And this picture shows the Tikigak way of food sharing on women's side. Thank you. I think it's next your turn, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Yoko. So, first of all, let me talk a little bit about the application of community-based research to our project here. It's through this we've been able to learn about how local conditions have changed in reaction to climate and socioeconomic change, essentially globalization. And we could make predictions before we were working with the communities, but working in the communities, we learned that we were often wrong in those predictions. And we learned from participating with local people, not only through interviews and focus groups and so forth, but just in participating in daily activities of life, as Yoko has been saying. And you can see the tuktak here in the meat caches in Savunga. As they're fermenting down here. Of course, to hear about it is one thing, to be there and to see it and to understand it and to taste it is a completely different thing. It requires, of course, great skill to know how to do this, and ideal conditions as well. And because of socioeconomic changes as well as climate change, how this is being done and how many people are doing it in the community has greatly changed. And so through community-based participatory research, we've been able to learn how and why these changes have occurred. One of the most important ways, changes, of course, has been the increasing globalization and the access to, well, basically consumer products that globalization has caused, and everything from electricity to processed foods to tools and so forth. And, as would be the case with pretty much any human, if a tool shows up that makes life easier, it's often adopted into the culture and used in local ways. And we found that to be the case very much in these instances where we found a transference of skills between methods of creating conditions for the fermentation of meat. And we've seen as permafrost thaws and so forth, that some of these, particularly like this one in Savonga, have become partly above or fully above ground to avoid the conditions of the melting permafrost. Of course, this is affecting all the communities that still make use of these underground meat caches. And so let me also move my slides here. Sorry, my notes here. To talk a little bit then about the summary of findings here, we've got a few slides, and I just wanted, before I pass it on back over to Yoko, I just want to point out that the food security and food sovereignty topics in this research and even in this presentation are based on and include relationships between humans and non-humans, and ostensibly, of course, between non-human entities as well. And this includes everything from maintaining these relationships according to local customs and worldview understandings of the environment, along with harvesting skills, the sharing of food, the storing of food, knowledge of the land. And through these lifeways, really these communities have been able to adapt to changes in the environment and in the global economy that have been brought about by colonization and factors of globalization. And so what we're finding is that local cultural adaptations to place are serving well for local adaptations to the changing larger economic and natural environments in the regions. So I will turn it back over to Yoko to do the first of or to talk a little bit about some of our initial findings. Thanks, Yoko.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, so there are some bullet points on this slide, but here are some highlights of this project findings. We conducted a few trips in 4 partner communities annually, and we tried to visit the communities in various seasons to observe those, as Mike mentioned, as activities, seasonal activities. Also, we have conducted the multiple interviews. And according to NITAS, in the 4 communities, permafrost thawing, shoreline erosion, and shifting climate patterns have weakened underground food storage practices due to loss of optimal environmental conditions. And also, Mike mentioned that technological change, that some community mentioned that using 4-wheelers and driving around this ice settler area, that has been kind of changing, weaken the land conditions. Cellar owners still want to maintain or repair their cellars for storing meat to continue their lifeways, such as a meat fermentation, storing mass of meat in the cellars, and that was their traditions. In Point Hope, maintaining and repairing ice cellar continues to be important task for whaling captains to distribute whale meat, tails, and maktak to the community, especially elders, because they know elders really like those the flavor of the meat, and that's they want to continue the food distributions, and that's also strengthen their culture identities and practices. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yoko. And so to continue on with some of our, whoops, I'm sorry about that. Let me see if I can get that back up there. There we go. To continue on with some of our initial findings in the project so We've learned that due to the arrival of course, outside technology and methods, things that this has led to change in the communities, particularly the arrival of snow machines and electricity, which enabled the use of freezers. And freezers came about in different communities at different times, but anywhere from basically the 1970s to the 1980s. And we see almost an immediate change in storage behaviors at this time. Of course, locals often would report that making use of electric freezers is easier, but it doesn't provide for the taste of the meat that Yoko had mentioned that elders prefer, and I should say some non-elders too. It is, of course, an acquired taste, and it seems that young people are less familiar with this taste because these fermenting processes are less familiar, are less commonly done now. But it was interesting that we found in each community that there are young people who are, and by young people, I mean, let's say non-elders in this sense, because the people who are our age today were young people back, of course, when the freezers and electricity were coming in. And so many of them have lived most of their life without participating in these activities in some communities, whereas such as Onektivik Pass, whereas in other communities, such as Point Hope, the use of these underground meat caches continues to the present, and very vigorously too, with the St. Lawrence Island communities being somewhere sort of in between. What we see, though, too, is that there's an interest in from elders to reinvigorate or reconstruct or even build completely new ice cellars and communities, if for no other reason, to keep the tradition alive and to pass it on to younger generations. Many within those younger generations seem eager to learn about these conditions. And so really then what we've come to learn is that the acculturation of institutions from outside the culture is a process that is an act of self-determination. It's different than assimilation because communities participate, the people who make up communities are choosing what is going to be important, what's going to be brought into the culture, and then try to mitigate the effects of that. And of course, some of that is almost unavoidable, as some elders especially have pointed out to us, because of economic globalization, because of access to the world's economy through the internet and so forth. And these are changes that seem to be inevitable in many elders' eyes, but ones that they feel also, I think, can be mitigated and a balance brought about by reinvigorating some of these food life history oriented traditions that enable food to be a carrier of culture as it always is, but in this case to even revitalize culture through how the food is caught, respectfully processed, redistributed through the community, and of course consumed, because that's the funnest part of it. So let me talk a little bit here just briefly, and we'll wrap this up in the next few minutes here, about the goals of the project here. And I think it's important to review these goals, both in terms of the project's research questions, as well as the accomplishments of the project and its continuation. Our first goal prior to beginning this work was to provide each community a comprehensive record of food life history for the foods that are stored in underground caches. And what we found is that this varies highly. It varies highly between communities based on the local, of course, ecological conditions, the environment, the dependency on the local, global economy, as well as the interest of people in the community locally. What we've seen, though, is that these are always, and without exception, very specific to place. And clearly, even though communities are very interested in sharing what they're learning about, what we're all learning about food life history and about meat caches, is that there's no one solution. Each community has different expectations, different ambitions for what they want to achieve. And so the solutions for revitalizing these sorts of practices really rest in the hands of the community, and we try to change our project in ways to meet those expectations and interests. And so we also try to use local traditional knowledge to inform our understanding of the food life cycle and life history. And I think we've made that evident through this presentation. Again, we recognize ourselves as researchers. We don't know, right? That's why we're researching, as the learners. And the experts, of course, are the people in the community who live this as part of their daily lives. And so, of course, they know it deeply and intimately, and the complex connections and relationships that surround it, things that we can't even see as outsiders, that we have to learn through local knowledge. We also intend to develop food security plans and strategies with communities. And I'll be honest, this was a tough one at the very beginning because we had some idealized notions of what these would be. And of course, they never fit with the community's expectations. And so we had to change those notions and work to develop strategies that, again, reflected the interest of the communities in the maintenance and revitalization of these cultural practices. One thing that we have done is to identify for future excavation potential underground caches that have been used and are no longer used. We drained one about a year and a third ago or so, the summer of 2023. To do this, but because of the the thawing permafrost and so forth, we had it filled right back up again. And we're talking a community cellar here that was probably about 15 by 15 feet across in a kind of a cylinder shape, probably 8 to 15 feet deep as well, with a ladder entrance through the top. And so this is a lot of ice, a lot of filling in. And so this is one example, and we've had 2 of the 4 communities ask us to assist them in the construction of new meat caches, which we hope to do separate from this project in terms of funding sources, but still as partnering with the academic aspects of this project. Both Anaktuvik Pass and Gamble have suggested that we find ways to help them to create a new community cellar or something similar. And I'm very eager to see that come to fruition if it can happen. We've also compared the physical qualities of the underground caches and looked at the differences between communities. And I should point out, too, that we're focusing on the 4 Alaskan communities here, but this includes communities in Japan, as well as in Siberia, particularly in Sakha or Yakutia. And we now even have a partner researcher in Mongolia who's been doing some of the same work. And so we're definitely looking at this from a partially circumpolar, what would that be, semi-circumpolar perspective, with the hope, of course, of spreading it to other parts of the Arctic. And we've even discussed looking at other underground storage facilities in other parts of the world. We've found these in Iran as well as in what's today Chile and so forth. But we haven't brought those into our current research yet. And this way we can kind of compare how, and the communities too can kind of compare how they construct their underground storage facilities and what works and what doesn't work under conditions of climate change, economic change, and especially permafrost thawing and ground subsidence that occurs as a result of that. And then, of course, as a part of that, we're looking to look at mitigation strategies, how we can deal with the conditions of warming and still maintain these facilities in certain places. And through the help of our partners in this project, who are natural scientists, one who focuses on the cryosphere, the other who focuses on climate change. We've put sensors into, as Yoko mentioned, we've put sensors into these facilities to try to measure changes in temperature and light, in some cases even the presence of various gases and things like this. Likewise, the natural science or earth science partners have been able, where communities provide permission, to use satellite data to better understand where subsidence is happening on the land as a result of permafrost thawing. And this is done, of course, in cooperation with projects, and including one that Yoko is the PI on from the National Park Service. And she'll talk about this one briefly because it's tied directly to this project and it's a way to bring people together. And then I'll talk very briefly about another partnering organization, the Polar Steam project and effort, and they're partnering with us this summer. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Yoko. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I just want to briefly introduce this upcoming event, Elders and Youth Workshop. This came from some elders, specifically in St. Lawrence Island, because they always ask us that which community are working on this project, how we are learning about maintaining ice setters, how they see the changes of climate or technology that has been affecting use of ice setters. And they ask me, or they ask us that what if they can, the St. Lawrence Islanders, they can learn, share the knowledge with other communities. And that became in my mind, and work with the school in Sabunga and Gambell. We were able to receive the grant from National Park Service to organize a workshop. And we initially planned to do this in March, back in March, but we have to reschedule it. Now we are planning to have this happening in October, that we are going to bring some elders from Sabunga to Gambell, so as we're going to invite elder from Point Hope to Gambell to learn their knowledge, to share the knowledge of use of underground food storage practices. And after this workshop, community research assistant, workshop committee members, and the UAF researchers, we plan to compile the finding and publish the poster and share with upcoming community meetings, as well as hopefully regional meetings in 2024 and 25. And those are pictures of the committee members in St. Lawrence Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoko. And then the last thing I want to do here too is to acknowledge the efforts of the Polar Steam program, which many of you, of course, are familiar with, and to thank them for reaching out to provide partnerships with educators. Megan Nealon, who's in the audience here, thank you for joining. Megan joined us this summer in Unaktuvik Pass. She is a horticultural and agricultural educator, and brought not only seeds with her, but worms from Southern California to work with local school kids and others too about gardening in the community, and talk to one of the local expert gardeners as well. And so we really support this kind of I was about to say cross-cultural because that's everything we do in our career, it seems. So I was going to, but instead, I mean cross-project efforts to support one another. I think that Megan's presence with us in Unaktuvik Pass this year enhanced our own project by bringing people's attention to it who maybe otherwise wouldn't have shown an interest. Another really excellent aspect was the bringing in of little kids because a community-based project needs to include everybody in the community. As social science researchers, we tend to focus on the elders and other knowledge bearers, of course, in the community. But we recognize too that children themselves are knowledge bearers and can not only be participants in activities such as those described by Yoko and those carried out by Megan, but of course they also are carriers of local knowledge and even traditional knowledge often. And we can learn from them if we include them in our research. And then, of course, we can always qualify it by further discussions with elders and other knowledge bearers in the community. And so just to kind of wrap up then, really, this is a community-based effort that differs from community to community, even though we have a through line of research questions and theoretical and methodological approaches that kind of tie it all together. So to close it out here, I'll turn it back over to Yoko. Thanks, Yoko.
Thank you. Yes. So using a CBPR approach and working with community research assistants, We have experienced local perspectives at the oral history interviews and participating in activities such as cutting whale meat, intestines, makdak, eating whale, walrus, and seal meat with northern indigenous peoples, and harvesting local food with them. While participating in Kagurak Whale Festival in Point Hope, organized workshop with students in an active class, and participated in various local activities and lots of four-wheel rides in those communities. Their local assistant and residents shared with us, research team, their own thoughts and memories about their knowledge of underground food storage and the changes of landscape and lifeways. For instance, when we were eating this traditional food in Gambia, so the family took me to his historical settlement, family settlement, where their great-grand and grandparents lived. They used whale bones to build an underground meat cache near their soda houses. And when he was bringing us to the site, this was so amazing experience we had. Reawakening the memory and the history of these futures through this project would provide locally relevant, meaningful information for the communities building their future cultural revitalization plans. And we look forward to learn more about their food life ways and working with communities to continue support their thriving cultural traditions and identities into the future. And we recently, past July, we just submitted a continuous research grant to National Science Foundation, Arctic Social Science Program, and this upcoming, I was agreed that I'm going to be a PI for this project. I'm looking forward to continue working with the communities. We also have now additional community. They want to participate and engage with the communities, and they like to continue using ICERAs to maintain their food life ways. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yoko, and thank you too to ARCUS and to UAF, Cross-Cultural Studies, especially to our co-researchers on this and related projects, and most especially, of course, to the communities who tolerate us and help us to learn how they're adapting to these global climate and economic changes. Thanks to you all, and we can open it up for questions now. Janet, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike and Yoko, for those great presentations, and thanks to everybody that has joined us today. We do have a moment or two where we can take a few questions. There were a lot more questions than we'll be able to answer today, but on chat, I told everybody we'll save the chat and we'll send you to the questions, and you too can respond to them through a written comment, and we'll share that back out with participants later on because there were some awesome questions. And also, I think, Mike, you have a little bit of time after we stop the recording, so people, you can, if you have a moment, you can stay afterwards and ask those questions to Mike at least. And Yoko has to go catch a plane here at the top of the hour. So the first question, I'm just gonna do it because there's a group of students in Anoka that have joined us, and from Faith, a student at Anoka River School. She wants to know what you know now about the study. What do people plan on doing with this information? A 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, etc. And what is sustainability? And I know you talked a little bit about this, but maybe you can address Faith's question.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just real briefly tackle sustainability, and then Yoko, you can follow up if you would like on how this information and knowledge that is being generated by the project will continue to be used into the future. But sustainability, of course, is a very place-specific concern. In general, of course, it means being able to continue current cultural practices into the future without degrading the capacity for future generations to continue those cultural practices. But specifically, it depends on the local community, the community's needs, the community's ambitions or aspirations, the community's ideas for their own future development planning, and so forth. Of course, the local economic and ecological conditions are always influenced by the political conditions and the political situation of a particular place. So sustainability is very complex, and what it means has to be worked out from community to community, from place to place. And once that happens, then regionally, I think more effective policy can be set to help to maintain that sustainability. Yoko?
Thank you. Yes, for the time-wise, we are hoping that we would like to continue this project at least 3 or 4 additional years, because we learned that 3 years was not long enough to monitoring ice settler conditions, and also talking with elders. And now each community, they have their goals. For instance, some communities, Gambia and Kutubuk Pass, they are hoping they would like to construct a new ice settlers. That means that we need to find an additional funding, and we probably have to bring more the elders or wedding captains who have experience the building the ICERA to the other communities. So I think there's more to go through. Also now, Japanese team, they received another funding from Japan side. So we are going to work with internationally. This is a big picture and we don't know yet, but it'd be nice if we can have international workshop across those semi-polar circular regions, hopefully from Siberia, Mongolia, and Japan, and we can work together. Thank you. Oh, and then one thing, from that area, we plan to have produced multilingual, bilingual book for the publication in the future using Russian, hopefully Russian, Mongolian, Japanese, English. I don't know if we can do Yupik or Siberia Yupik, but that's probably our dream a little bit.
Wonderful plans. All right. Like I said, I will share all of the other questions. There was some really wonderful and thoughtful questions that got shared in the chat, and then some people even responded to those questions. So I know you two were presenting. I want to make sure you get that information and you can have some time to respond to those questions. A lot of people have been signing off and saying thank you. The latest comment was thank you for hosting most interesting, respectful, and thoughtful presentation. Very much appreciate all the knowledge and insight from Mike and Yoko. So with that, again, yeah, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Mike will stay on. Yoko, we know you have to catch a plane, but thank you for joining us today. Just a heads up to everybody that's still there. Please take a moment to use this QR code and fill out the survey. I think it might be also shared in the email that goes out to all of you about the seminar series. And we also want to make sure that you know that there's some upcoming seminars, webinars that we're doing. On the screen, we have a list of what they are, but as always, you can find out through the ARCUS website and through Arctic Info what is happening. Some very interesting webinars coming up. And we also have an annual meeting that we will be hosting in October. So hopefully you will all join for that. Again, thank you to NSF for funding this, and thank you, Mike and Yoko, for your wonderful presentation. And Stacy did put the link in the chat as well. So we'll stop the recording, or no, we'll be here. We'll let people sign off, and Mike, or if there are people in the audience that want to ask Mike their questions directly, feel free to open your mic up and just ask them on your own. And,
thank you.
Yeah. Oh, she wants the QR code again. So I will just respond to Joy. Joy, in the chat is the URL for the survey. And then the QR code is up. Okay. Anybody want to ask their question live to Mike, if you're still here? Yeah, go ahead, Nathan. Open up your mic. Let's see. We can't hear you, Nathan.
You're still on mute.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
there we
trying
go.
to.
Sorry,
Yep.
can you hear me?
Yes, we
thank you.
can.
Okay, yeah, sorry, the mic wasn't allowing me to turn it on. But hey, Mike, nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Um,
Thanks for
yeah,
joining.
yeah, absolutely. So I was really curious about how maybe the sort of shorter history of reindeer husbandry might have played into like the meat cache usage, especially on St. Lawrence Island. With Savunga being originally a reindeer field camp from Gamble, and sort of the integration of modern agriculture practices with traditional knowledge systems, sort of if there was discussion or if the community talked about that at all.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very good and important question. Of course, reindeer were introduced to St. Lawrence Island in the late 18 and early 1900s. And they still are there on the island. Well, of course, their descendants are still there on the island. And they were there, of course, to address the food shortages that were directly related to, of course, the whaling, the non-native whaling, the commercial whaling that occurred in the region. And uh, uh, those reindeer have become, of course, a part of local tradition. Even if they were introduced, this is another instance of a culture deciding to adopt into its own way of life, a tradition from outside its own culture, and this, of course, is acculturation. And they've made that herd their own in full. It's not intensively herded. It roams more or less on its own, but it is, of course, watched and maintained, and it's hunted as well. The last time we were there, which was earlier this year, it was explained that the herd, in fact, is doing so well and has spread further than it ever has before on the island. Um, there's no question about it, though, that the preference is for sea mammals in both communities. But I think that most people see the reindeer as a very present and very easy to maintain. They don't leave the island. They won't cross the ice. So they stay there. And they pretty much are essentially feral reindeer. So in the sense, we could say that they're wild reindeer, which is, of course, many languages word for caribou. And so, in a way, then they're basically reindeer that are becoming caribou again, except for, of course, in the non-intensive way that they are managed on the island. Their meat generally is not kept in these meat caches. It's generally consumed much quicker. And I think that in terms of cultural symbols, it doesn't carry the same sort of weight and value that sea mammals do. It's also the meat itself is treated more similarly to, I would say, meat that's acquired from the store rather than meat that's acquired from the sea. Although it is still treated in ways that are respectful because it's recognized that it's being provided by a living creature. Economically speaking, what I've noticed is that when things are maybe a little thin in terms of access to sea mammal resources, the reindeer are brought in, and local people seem to really like it and enjoy it. It's often prepared very differently. I've never seen it fermented in the way that sea mammal meat is fermented, but it is there and a part of the local economy, fully integrated into it. That's a really excellent question. Thanks, Nathan.
Okay, it looked like Art Nash wanted to ask a question. We'll try to get you to be unmuted here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I actually had two questions. One having to do with Gamble in particular, and a lot of the Northwest villages that are being inundated right now, and I don't mean that in a bad way, by entire teams of folks from Southeast Asia coming to teach and starting to mingle with the villages and bring their own foods. and looking for ways to store their own foods. In your studies, are you just looking at Alaska Natives, or if there are other large people groups that are coming in, whether it's Ukiagvik, where there's always been a tradition of different cultures doing restaurants, or whether it's folks who are coming up to work, albeit possibly seasonally, possibly year round? Are you integrating are you studying them or studying with them about food preservation and their foods and diets also?
Yeah, that's an important question, and definitely we are. As a community-based focus for the research, we include everyone who the community recognizes as being a part of that community. And as you've said, in some cases there are teachers who have been there for many years. A great number of people are teaching in St. Lawrence Island, as well as in, like you said, the western areas, the northern areas. From the Philippines, and one of them was in one of the pictures in the presentation. In fact, they generally are associated with a school, and the school is generally very involved in community activities. And so, yes, definitely, that's local, not non-native or non-indigenous, I should say. People who are non-indigenous to the local place who are considered to be a part of the community, are considered in that in the study as well. What we find is that there is some passing of food traditions. We tend to see that the food traditions of the local place tend to be adopted more readily by those who are not from the local place than the other way around, which is interesting to see as well, because when we look at, say, if there's a local store, when we look at the local stores, these are, of course, the international food products, basically, that you can get in any store anywhere in any urban area in the world. And this is considered to be significantly different than the traditional foods being brought in by people from Philippines or from Korea or wherever else they may be coming in and settling from. So as far as the preservation of those foods go, we don't generally look at this unless those foods are being consumed on a community-wide basis, mainly because of limitations of time and resources. We have come across a few teachers, though, who have tried to use local preservation techniques on their own foods with various levels of success, mainly just as an interest to try to see what would happen if a particular different kind of food meat is fermented and so forth. But for the most part, what we see is is the adoption of local food practices by those who are coming in from outside. Thanks for that question.
And there was a question from Amelia that was typed in the chat. Amelia, you're welcome to ask it yourself, but in the meantime, she says it's a big question, but I was wondering if you have documented what kind of methods are best to achieve this. Oh, sorry, I should say, we'll start off. I like how you described how in order to have food sovereignty, you need to have self-determination within the community. It's a big question, but I was wondering if you have documented what kinds of methods are best to achieve this, which community partners, organizations have come into the communities to work on this specifically, what kinds of community structures, internal organizations, and activities are working well to achieve this across the varying communities you work with.
Yeah,
and that will probably be our last one before we let you go and recover.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that's Amy who provided that question. That's an important one. We're conscious to include all organizations in each community who are who show an interest. So we always, of course, discuss the project with the tribal government or its equivalent, the city government, if there is one, or its equivalent, and the corporation government, if there is one. And I say if there is one because these are all present in most West and North Coast communities, but not necessarily in interior communities where I also do a lot of work. And I think that what's most effective is when tribal councils or their equivalents are willing to assert and are comfortable asserting their right to self-determination. Oftentimes, what I see as an outsider is kind of a holding back at government levels of that assertion for concern of maybe upsetting other actors in the power structures. I've been, working in Alaskan communities now for 25 years or more, and I've seen that change greatly over that quarter century. More so and more so, local councils are empowering themselves by simply deciding to do so and asserting that right of self-determination locally. And I think that this is what's most important. A lot of the conditions of notions of power and authority come from practicing it. And even if it's against the culture that tends to be deferential and humble and giving, sometimes there needs to be, when dealing across cultures with other power structures, this kind of assertion of the right to self-determination at the local level. And what I found 25 years ago is that there would often be resistance by especially state and to a lesser degree federal structures. I don't see that as nearly as prominent today. Particularly the federal government seems to be more willing to listen and to work and to acknowledge the rights to self-determination. And we can just say that the state government is learning, hopefully, from that too. So I think that to kind of summarize a final answer here, I think that the best way to promote these conditions for self-determination is to assert them, for local leaders to assert them in their government structures, both those that are recognized by outside government, such as the federal government, as well as traditional local decision-making structures that are often not seen by the outsider. And this is happening. I've seen over this past generation. Thank you.
All right, Art, I'll let you slip in there one more time and that's it.
I welcome the question. Thank you, Art.
Art, your mic. We aren't hearing you. There you
Okay,
go.
can you
We
hear
hear
me
you
now?
now. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I teach classes from the U to community members on cellars and look at three aspects. One is to preserve taste,
Mhm.
to preserve nutrition as the food is stored, but maybe more importantly, food safety.
Yeah, that's an issue.
Not pertaining to permafrost, but as villages like Anatuvik or Bettles end up becoming more into discontinuous permafrost, there might be more, there might be more traditional methods for subsurface cellars. And so we can employ, circulation, ventilation, insulation to try to address those three things: the taste, the nutrition. But on the health end, because of the change of temperature and humidity, subsurface, when you get into discontinuous permafrost, if the villages are going to go that way, there's a concern from a food science point of view that with different temperature zones and such, you might actually not just get spoilage, but you might actually get illnesses. And so I'm wondering, as there's a creep northward of discontinuous permafrost up towards the Brooks Range, I mean, is there any interest within the villages that you see of learning some of the more Western sciencey information about food safety and when things are safe to eat and when they're not, and when there could be diseases that are starting to grow that traditionally haven't been there? Have those kind of questions started to emerge at all, or are they still just thinking ice, ice, ice?
Yes, they actually have, because they're very aware of the different conditions, particularly, of course, the elders. There have been a few experiments in some of the adjusted, reduced sized, more surface situated boxes for fermenting, and there have been a few instances where it led to conditions where the food had to be thrown away because it didn't ferment in a way that was healthy. We've even been warned in some communities that certain people are not maybe providing enough attention to this concern and are risking health as a result. And so there's a real effort to make sure that those who truly have the knowledge are the ones who are inspecting how these are being built, maintained, and how the fermentation is occurring. But at the same time, there's also a recognition and interest in some more modern industrial sort of techniques that could help to mitigate this, such as the use of heat siphons, putting up firm walls, metal, concrete, even wood has been suggested, as has been used in the past, to try to hold the inner structure together as the permafrost melts. The main goal, of course, is to find areas of land that have solid permafrost still, and that's where our natural scientists come in with their satellite work to try to bring this information to communities. And so it seems in most cases that most communities, while they have a preference to adhere to traditional methods of construction, they also recognize the importance of health and the practicality of not having the food spoil. And so most communities have expressed a willingness to mix local traditions and industrial techniques to make it more stable, safe, and dependable. Another great question. Thank you, Art.
Yep, there's a lot of really good questions in the chat, so I look forward to sending it to you and Yoko so you have time to respond to them thoughtfully. With that, I think we're going to sign off, and thank you for everybody that stayed past the hour. And yeah, we look forward to sending a recording out to everybody and seeing you hopefully at a future seminar or Tender Talk. So everybody have a great day, and thank you, Mike, for joining us.